Let's go! Are you kidding me? Every single day since the national championship game has just gotten worse if you're an LSU football fan. Outside of a few recruiting hits, there hasn't really been that many positives. And this right here, LSU football self-imposing penalties? Ugh. So we're going to get down into the nitty-gritty of the story. Most of you that are just now getting off of work or you're just now reading and hearing about this, you're going to see Odell Beckham Jr. in the title, and I'm going to tell you why this is actually a good thing that Odell Beckham Jr. is involved. So, basically, the NCAA has been investigating LSU for a few years now, and one of the things that they investigated was Odell Beckham Jr. after the national championship game giving out $2,000 in wads of cash. So for those that don't remember the Odell Beckham Jr. incident, well, here it is in front of all these cameras, giving a stack to Justin Jefferson, who of course was no longer a college football player at that very second, and then also money to Jontre Kirkland, who is obviously still with the team. This is obviously not the message that the NCAA wants to send out. Some of you think this isn't really a big deal because you believe college players should be paid. No matter how you look at it, if you go by the rules that we have now, this is not a good sign. And after speaking to sources in the program, they thought that this eventually was going to backfire on them. And all of that aside, with Odell Beckham Jr. getting this 2-year ban from the LSU football program, you know, this is really a selfish look. You know, if you're doing this, you know, with all those cameras around, and you know with your stardom, that you are just going to set off a vicious news cycle. Seriously, the next day, all the national media was talking about was this incident. So, whether it's paying the band to play neck, which was actually a really cool thing, you know, I like Odell. A lot of you will forever like Odell. In fact, I just picked up this Odell Beckham, I think this is called a Sistine Chapel card from college. It was really cool. Got it for like $1. But, you know, this is just a further fall from grace that Beckham has had since the catch. So, yeah, doesn't really shock me. Probably a good thing for Odell to step away from LSU football and the limelight that comes along with it. So, this is actually a good thing, though, because when you actually got the alert on your phone earlier, the headline was not all this other stuff that came along with these self-imposed bans. The headline is about Odell Beckham Jr., which, of course, he is his own thing. The real story and the real shady stuff actually comes right now. And before we get to that, please hit the subscribe button. Road to 2,000 subscribers. Please comment, give me a thumbs up, let me know what you think about the Odell Beckham story and what we are about to talk about right now. So, as you continue to read the story, some great journalism here from my friend Ross Dellinger and Pat Forty. Obviously, the first part is about the Odell Beckham Jr. That's the most newsworthy thing. He's one of the biggest stars in the NFL. And this is a statement that LSU released to the media, and the one that I'm seeing the most. And it says what you would expect it to say. LSU is working with the NCAA on this matter and will continue to cooperate with the NCAA on this matter. So this is the actual ban. These are the actual penalties that LSU will self-impose. They're giving up 8 total scholarships over the next 4 seasons. Teams are normally allowed to only have a maximum of 85 scholarships per year. Well, you know, in recent years, LSU hasn't even hit that 85 scholarship player amount. So that's not as bad, and this does not take away their maximum of 25 newcomers a year. So LSU can just fill out their 2021 class as they see fit. But this is where LSU is really going to get hurt by this. Officials and unofficial visits will be eliminated to a certain degree, 12.5%, a 21-day reduction of the normal 168 days for off-campus contacts. And as Dellinger points out here, will this be enough to satisfy the NCAA? So these are self-imposed bans by LSU. It depends on what the NCAA decides to actually do with this. Now, for me, I don't know why LSU just didn't decide to have a self-imposed postseason ban this year. Okay? I cannot be the only one who's actually thought of this, right? Why not self-impose right now, a year that you're not even going to go to the playoff? I guess my logic in that would be the NCAA saying, well, this year doesn't really count. The next year we'll self-impose, or we will enforce a postseason ban. With that said, you have to ask the question, who of the current administration is involved with this story? So as you move along, it gets a little bit more into detail about, is this a level 1? Obviously, most of this part of the article comes down to how heavy were the violations against LSU. Now, this is where the shady stuff comes in, and this is why Odell Beckham Jr., being a part of the story, actually deflects the real blow from the story, which involves siphoning money from a hospital to treat sick people. Yes, this is how the dirty world of recruiting can get involved. So this is why Odell being involved is actually a good thing because, well, this part of the story is going to make you cringe just a little bit. So the coach and the athletic director who were involved with this next part of the story is no longer with LSU, Joe Oliva and Les Myles. So this is where this makes your skin crawl just a bit. The father of former offensive lineman Vadal Alexander received $180,000 in stolen money from LSU booster John Paul Funes, who admitted in 2009 that he embezzled more than $500,000 from Our Lady of the Lake Hospital in Baton Rouge. The money was a payment from 2012 to 2017, which the NCAA characterized as a no-show job. So this is not the first time this has actually been reported. In fact, my friends at And the Valley Shook, a really good writer, my friend and yours, Posier, wrote about this a few years ago. And this goes a little bit more into detail here about this story. This is on top of $107,000 that Funes sent to the family of Rohan Davey. And once again, this is according to Posier. And I remember reading this story. I mean, this just makes your skin crawl when you read all of this. So, obviously, this is more shady stuff involving third parties. Did Rohan Davey know about this? Did Vadal Alexander know about this? Well, because a lot of you remember the Cam Newton story, you know, that doesn't really matter at this point. So, yeah, those are the three big tenets of this story. It's the Vadal Alexander, the Odell Beckham Jr. cash incident, and now there's this, an impermissible recruiting contact in January of 2019 by LSU coach Ed Orgeron. So now this involves what's been going on with Will Wade and LSU basketball, and basically this part of the story is LSU football trying to separate itself from Will Wade and their own NCAA investigation. So, overall, and this just goes deeper into some minutia here, obviously all very important stuff, but this is the three big takeaways in these 3 bullet points right here. Here's the good news. Like I said, the Vadal Alexander storyline is far worse than the Odell Beckham Jr. story. okay? In fact, this wasn't even the craziest thing Odell Beckham Jr. said today. And, yeah, you know, you can have a completely different discussion about that, but still, this is a problem. It's a major problem. Obviously, no matter where you go, a lot of programs have their own issues with boosters and payments, and why did this recruit at the very last second decide to go to school X? You know, we can have our own hypotheticals all day long about the extent of this. Here's the big takeaway, is that this story is not over. LSU decided to get out in front of it. They decided to put some penalties amongst themselves. If the NCAA looks at this from afar, and if you're looking at this objectively, the timing of this is weird. A year in which LSU isn't really that good. If I were LSU, I would go ahead and say, look, no postseason this year. And then go from there. Now, will LSU get the death penalty? No. Is this story unbelievably damning and serious? No. But what I'll tell you is that this is just another sign of sloppiness on LSU's part. And it involves their two biggest sports at the school, which is basketball and football. Those are your two biggest revenue producers. So, overall, this isn't good under any circumstance. So we do it every video. Subscriber shout out Mark and Kingston's World both agree that Max Johnson should be the starter on Saturday against South Carolina. You know, I think most of our comments have been Max Johnson. I would say it's probably 7 out of every 10 of you saying that Max Johnson should be the starter. Ed Orgeron has already said he's a faster quarterback. So, I would lean towards Max Johnson getting the nod. And this is Mark from our live stream, who says the defense looks more confused than anything. I think the players are fine. We need to simplify. And Ed Orgeron has said just that this week, that LSU will be looking to simplify their defense. So, obviously, this is a breaking news video. It's kind of weird that we're doing this type of video. Let me know what you think of the Sports Illustrated story. I'll post a link down below for you to read it yourself. It's Power Hour LSU Bomb. I need some apple pie. Or some peach cobbler.